Hello, this is Don Shaw. I'd like to welcome you to episode 20 of Friend in the Mirror. And I'm just so happy to have you here with me today. This will actually be my last episode of the year of 2015. I'm going to take a break until January. So hopefully you'll all come back and join me then. I'm going to have a whole new barrage of interesting and exciting guests. And speaking of which, of course, I have one today. The title of today's episode is especially interesting to me. It's called Why People Stare, Easing Social Interaction. My guest today, actually, one of the things we're going to talk about that I'm really excited about is the science of staring. Because it's so easy to be in touch with our own feelings when we're different and we get stared at. But what is it that other people are thinking? Why is it that they stare at us? So today, my guest is Charlene Pell. Charlene is a burn survivor. Early in her recovery, she discovered that no programs in the United States existed to help adults adjust to a changed appearance. As a former communications executive, she used her experience and expertise to manage intrusive stares and explored and researched techniques to facilitate communication. She founded Facing Forward, a national nonprofit organization that provides information and emotional support and educational programs to help individuals with congenital or acquired visible differences contend with staring and also to communicate with confidence. Charlene offers lectures and workshops to this end, including What to Do When People Stare, which has been presented to more than 1,000 people in the United States and Canada. So, very happy today to welcome Charlene. And I know that Charlene has quite a story. So, could you read off with your story, Charlene?
Dawn, I'd first like to just thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of your series. I think this is very valuable, and the interviews are so educational and interesting. And to begin with my story, 21 years ago, I was living the life that I had always dreamed of. I was a successful executive with Dakota, the Design Center of the Americas. And I was engaged to an amazing man named Roger Craig, and just having such a fabulous life together. We weren't great skiers, but we liked to ski in Colorado, one of the many things that we did. And Roger had also bought a home in Cat Island, Bahamas. And we were renovating that home and had planned to spend more time together there. And it was actually on a flight to Cat Island. We had probably flown there 100 times. And on one particular flight, there was a problem with the landing gear. And unfortunately, it caused the plane to crash. And when I came to in the airplane and was attempting to escape, there were flames everywhere, and everything was burning and on fire. I got out of the airplane, and as we were trying to get away through the very dense brush in the Bahamas, the plane exploded, the fuel tanks exploded, what was determined. And at the time, I didn't realize that my entire body had been burned. I felt the pain specifically on my back. And it was much later. I was thrown to the ground. I lost track of Roger. And really, by the grace of God, I think I got to the road, and as well some little children that were playing on the runway that heard my screams and helped me go the right way. But it took 45 minutes to get to another airplane and to pilots that flew us back to the United States. And we were severely burned and were treated at Jackson Memorial Hospital in Miami. It was really a flight against all odds, but we did make it there. And as you see in this photo, in an instant, I was transformed from an attractive woman to someone who looks like a mummy in this picture, burned 64% of my body, full thickness burns. You know, I lost everything that mattered to me in my life, including my appearance, my livelihood, my hopes, my dreams. And I would find out about 3 or 4 months later that I had lost my fiance, who died as a result of his injuries due to sepsis. I was so blessed in this experience to have the loving devotion and support of my family, my mother and my sister, who, from the moment they got that horrible telephone call, were by my side. They were living in North Carolina at the time, but they alternated to be with me through several years and sacrificed so much to support me. One of the toughest things about the burn injury, as you saw in the previous, is the severe fracture and scarring, and that gets worse over time during the first 18 months. The picture that you just saw as well with me standing, that was nearly 8.5, 9 months later. I was in a rehab hospital for 5.5 months. That's my sister standing beside me, Melissa. And over the next 6 years, every 8 weeks, I had an operation, 50 operations in total to be able to get back to functioning. And I was in occupational and physical therapy for 5.5 years. This picture was taken by my plastic surgeon before he began the reconstructive surgery. And as you can see, the tight contractures around my mouth and my neck and my upper chest. And as I was going through all of this, these pictures that you saw where I really looked like a skeleton. And when I had the UVEX plastic mask on, which is worn to help to reduce the scarring, the raised scarring, I was out in public. People, of course, were staring at me because I looked like an alien. I didn't even feel like a woman anymore. I felt asexual. And I, like so many people who endure a catastrophic injury and their appearance is altered, I never imagined in my wildest dreams that I would ever find a man that I was interested in that would get beyond my scars to get to know me for the woman that I am. But I was so thrilled to be wrong about that. And of course, this didn't happen overnight. CH and I were married 5 years after my injury. And we actually met, we were introduced by my mother, of all people. And this is really makes you believe in fate. My mother was actually dating CH's father at the time of my accident. And his name was Hal, and I had actually met him, and he had been down to visit Roger and I, and you know, then this horrible accident happened. And as it turned out, Hal was by my side and one of my favorite caregivers throughout my recovery. And it was later when I was introduced to CH, and it was kind of like he was my big brother for a couple of years, and then that friendship evolved into a romance. And I'm so deeply blessed to be married to him because he's so supportive of me and my work, and he treats me like a princess.
Well, and you deserve to be treated like a princess, so why not? So that's really exciting because I know that one of the things that a lot of people have concerns about, people that have a different appearance or people whose appearances change, is that nobody's ever going to love me. So to hear your story is very inspirational for people who are in that situation and who just feel like there's, well, nobody is going to find me attractive. But what people forget is that attraction comes from the inside out. And the better you feel about yourself, the more attractive you're going to be to other people. So let's move on then from, I mean, that's absolutely phenomenal and it's such a terrible thing that happened. But I do want to move on to the title of our broadcast, which is Why People Stare. So, why do people stare?
First of all, we all stare. Perfectly normal to stare. Staring is an ocular response to seeing the unexpected. There's quite a bit of research to show that it actually takes the brain a longer time to process, to try to recognize, to discern what it's seeing when it's unfamiliar and unexpected. A zoologist by the name of Desmond Morris discovered that if you move the feature on a human face just 1/25th of an inch, 1 millimeter, that it will trigger the brain to do a double take. It's really fascinating. And as a rule, humans do not like asymmetry. We find that we value a person's appearance and find them pleasing if their features are symmetric. And this applies in nature as well, not just with human beings. You'll see this, I notice it all the time, in flowers and plants and fruits and of course other species where there is a difference. And of course, as human beings, one of the major reasons that we stare is we're curious. We want to understand what causes that person to look different than we look. So those are the primary reasons. There's also, they've identified the exact area in the brain called the fusiform, where that's the part of the brain that recognizes faces and facial expressions. And even some of the research tells us that this is maybe a primordial response to just survival of the fittest. So, I'm not a neuroscientist, so to go much deeper than that, we would be talking to somebody like that. But I think it's so important that anybody with a difference understands this, because to me, one of the greatest tragedies in life is for an individual with a visible difference to allow their difference to interfere with living, with getting out into public, with doing what they love to do and what they want to do. And I can tell you, throughout the years, I've worked with people who either had congenital differences or who acquired a difference 50 years ago, and they still have experiences that create so much anguish and upset and depression. So I just think it's so important to realize, people are going to stare forever. And that's why I agree with you too, that it's so important that we work from the inside out and that we develop the confidence and the social skills that we need to present a positive image and to dispel some of those myths that people believe about us because we look different.
Yeah, I mean, I know that one of the reasons that I decided to quit having surgery is because one, I had a really bad experience in my final surgery. And I realized that the amount of difference that was being made in my face, in my appearance, was so small. it's like what you say. I mean, I didn't read that research about people noticing infinitesimal differences and taking, doing a double take. But I did realize that the amount of difference that my face had, it was irrelevant. It wasn't going to matter. People were going to stare regardless. And I had to decide that I was going to be, I had to be willing to live with the way I looked. And of course, it was a process developing the confidence and the self esteem. So I definitely understand it doesn't happen overnight. But I do know, I mean, you mentioned your support system. You had family and eventually a very loving relationship. So overall, I mean, how would you judge your support system in the development of that esteem and confidence?
Well, I think I was also at a stage in my life as a mature woman and a very successful executive. So I had self confidence and I worked in the field of communications. So that was an asset for me to help me with this. But as far as the actual recovery, I could never have done this on my own without the love and the support of my mother and my sister. They were always there to encourage me, and on those horrible days where I was just so distraught or in such pain, and when it was hard to see what could be ahead, they were always there to cheer me on. And also some friends, not all my friends, because some friends couldn't cope with my changed appearance and everything that had happened to me, but most of them did. And I was so blessed to have this because so many people don't. And I think that if you don't have the support from your family, it's essential to look for that support in other places, with friends, with organizations, to reach out, to seek that support, because it does expedite this process and helps you with your self-confidence.
So if you're someone who does look different, someone like me or like you, what are some of the typical reactions that we have when people stare at us? For those who aren't different, I mean, what does it feel like? Can you describe that?
Describing what it feels like for other people like us that have the differences.
Share that.
Okay, all right. So what I've found throughout the last 10 years of doing these workshops, is the most frequent responses of what it feels like to be the object of a stare is awkward, uncomfortable. People feel angry. They feel unworthy. They feel upset. A few will say they feel acknowledged. Those are the self-conscious. All negative words except for one. Usually when we're in the room, we break into small groups and talk about these questions, and then we come back together and we write all the responses on these huge Post-its that we put around the room. And you'll see that most all of the words to describe what it feels like are negative.
So how can we, the object of stares, how can we turn that around?
The most important thing that we can do is to not react, but to respond or act. Because when we do that, we become the subject, not the object. We have an opportunity to control or to have some more control over what turns out to be a momentary interpersonal relationship between a starer and a staree. And 90% of the way we form an opinion about somebody when we first meet them is based on nonverbal communication. It's on posture, it's on gestures, it's on facial expressions. Now, some conditions make it more difficult to use facial expressions, like Mobius syndrome, or somebody that might have like you as well with a partial paralysis. that makes it a little more difficult sometimes. Or eye contact. People who, when we're so blessed to be sighted, we can use our eyes to make that connection. But the first thing, and it's so simple, the very first thing we can do is smile. A smile is just a universal welcoming invitation. It's universally recognized as friendly and inviting. So that's so important. We can initiate conversation, and this takes time to work on, to practice. And when we do initiate conversation, it's really important to focus on what we have in common. For example, if we're at a conference, then we can talk about or ask questions or make comments about what's going on, things that we have in common to put us on a common ground. And like as I said, initiating that conversation, you can kind of help to direct it. Very important. There are many different things you can do as well, but those are the easiest. And then one of my colleagues, James Partridge, who is the founder of Changing Faces, James actually pioneered this thought, which I totally agree with, back in probably before 98, when he advocated that those of us with a physical difference formulate a one-sentence explanation of what causes our difference. And we can also have a longer version. And then we have an opportunity when we're talking with people to educate them about what causes us to look different. And I never want people to feel obligated or that they're responsible to do this, but if we do, I think this can have the greatest impact in society because we're creating that awareness. We're putting a face to a different kind of condition. And that's another thing I love about these interviews that you're doing that makes them so valuable. So I'm a real strong proponent of that, and we practice that in the workshops. We practice devising that statement and sharing it with each other, and also the paragraph that we have when we can detect that someone's genuinely interested in what we want to share with them, so we can go into more detail. And then we really practice eye contact a lot because there's so much research to show that the eye contact connects us. We remember more of our conversation with somebody when we're looking directly in their eyes. And but there are many things that we can do.
Yeah, eye contact is definitely, and that is a learned behavior.
Yes.
If you're not feeling confident, or if you're feeling like you're uncomfortable being stared at, looking somebody in the eye, especially in a friendly way. I mean, I know that one of my reactions for many, many years of being stared at was to get defensive. And I would stare back, I would scowl at people. It was not, I mean, it was when I learned to do the smile and wave and say hi, it improves things a lot. Because what happens is when you engage people, it's like something clicks, especially with kids. When you engage them, they understand that you're human. I mean, not that they assume you're anything but you just become more accessible to them as a fellow human being.
Also, I think it's so important for those of us with a visible difference to remember that most of the public is unfamiliar with these conditions. We're dealing with an uneducated public. There are not any classes about how to interact with people who have differences. And we also have to appreciate that when they're encountering us, they're trying to understand what's making us different, to get comfortable. One of the greatest fears that people without difference report in the workshops is they're so concerned about saying or doing the wrong thing that they will hurt somebody's feelings, that often they'll use avoidance just to not have to have any interaction because they're scared to death to do the wrong thing. We also have to remember that viscerally, some people literally become nauseous. They become sick. They physically have a reaction to some of certain kinds of conditions that individuals may have, and we can't really find fault. I mean, people can't help some of these reactions, and of course there's a very difference between staring or gawking or teasing and bullying. You know, the meaning of stare is to search with an earnest gaze, to, you know, it's trying to understand. There's nothing malice there. People don't, and well, I should say the majority of people don't intend to be hurtful. And yet, as I said before, some individuals with visible difference carry around for decades remembrances of incidences in their life where somebody stared at them. And I think we need to put those all in perspective. Again, it is very difficult to function in society with a visible difference. And we all have different levels of confidence, of self-esteem, of skills, social skills or communication skills. It's easier for some people than others. It's extremely difficult for some people. So I never want to minimize that. But I think that if we can just help people to understand that, don't focus so much on the staring. Let it go. Do your best to smile, to be pleasant, to expect a positive outcome. If you don't get it, move on. You know, I think one thing I can share with you that it's an incident that I still find a little bit annoying still today. And that's that the scenario always seems to be the same. I'll be at a restaurant and I'll go to the restroom, and there'll be a beautiful woman in the restroom the same time that I'm there. And I'll say hello and attempt to engage in a conversation, and the person will ignore me and act like I'm invisible, that I don't even exist. And I really find that to be one of the most hurtful things that we can do to people as individuals. And then I can give you an example of a situation of my husband possibly being out on a walk and saying hello to somebody who passes by, and my husband has no visible difference, and the person might not speak to him. And I'm sure lots of people that are viewing this have had the same experience. And this varies too, depending on what part of the country you live in, I think. But, you know, so people who aren't out of the ordinary experience this, but they don't take it the same way that those of us do. They don't perceive it the same way. And talking about perception, this is really the key to the workshop. What we do through asking this series of questions and having all this interaction is we reframe the experience of being the subject of a stare. Through the exercises, the individuals that have visible differences also understand that they too stare. And it's just my favorite moment of the workshop where you have that aha moment that people realize that they do the same thing that causes discomfort when someone else does it, as far as the staring. And it causes them to think about the situation in a different way. And then it doesn't produce as much anxiety or depression or upset. So that's really the key to the success of the program. Now, the slide that you just put up is actually another program that I started in 2000 as well, which is called the Outside Inside program. And that's primarily for middle school students, although we have presented the program with high school students. And that's part of a program wherein we introduce the students to individuals who have visible differences that are leading successful, happy, fulfilled lives, to show the students that just because you have a difference doesn't mean that you can't have the same kinds of dreams and accomplishments and successes as anyone else. And it encourages acceptance and appreciation of difference, and as well for the students. And one of my favorite questions to always ask the students during this workshop is, tell me what it is about your best friend that makes you like that person or love that person the most. And it's never about what they look like. It's an enduring quality. It's their sense of humor. It's their personality, their intellect, their character, not their appearance. Their appearance is a small part of what attracts them and keeps them being a friend.
And I think that's key right there. The idea that, I mean, we may make our first impressions on appearance, but if someone has that opportunity to overcome the initial impression, I mean, I couldn't even tell you what half my friends look like. Now, maybe it's because I'm non-observant, but it doesn't matter to me. It's just not important. And I don't know, I'm not even sure that it would occur to my friends to describe me to somebody else as, oh, well, half her face doesn't work. I mean, when I am out there and I'm going to meet with somebody, of course, I'm either going to send them a photo or I'm going to tell them, believe me, I'm easy to recognize. So I actually use it to my advantage sometimes. But I will say I agree that appearance, anyone who is not your friend because of how you look, good riddance, because you sure don't need them as a friend.
Absolutely.
So are you ready to talk about facing forward?
Sure, but before I go there, again, I never want to diminish how important appearance is in our society. You know, the United States spends more money on the beauty industry than it does on education and social services. So appearance matters, and because of what we just discussed about the fact that people will always stare, that is why I firmly believe that a significant visible difference often is a social disability. And that can also lead to discrimination in the workplace. So, you know, it is a very serious issue, and something that we have to continue to try to break down those barriers. And that's one of the things that Facing Forward does. You know, I started Facing Forward in 2009. And prior to 2009, most of my work had been with burn survivors. And I decided that I wanted to not only work with individuals with burn injuries, but to expand that work to individuals with a difference caused by any reason. And so that's what I began doing, because I've learned over the years that it doesn't really matter what causes your difference. We experience very similar issues and challenges. So Facing Forward presents the two workshops that we've discussed, the What to Do When People Stare and the Outside Inside You Decide program. We provide a monthly telephone support group that we hope that in the near future we can evolve into something like this, where we'll all be able to see one another. And we advocate for improvements and advancements in care for individuals with visible differences and programs for them. And we provide one-to-one support. I work with individuals on a one-to-one basis to help them adjust, or I work with parents of children with visible differences. And we provide a lot of referrals because there are other organizations, and you've interviewed some of the individuals with those organizations that can help with specific syndromes where we don't have the expertise in those particular areas that other people do. So that's a really important aspect of our work as well.
So one of the things I wanted to bring up before I forgot, when you were talking about the significance of appearance, it occurs to me opposite. I mean, people who have a different definitely get stared at, but also think about it. People who are incredibly good looking, also people stare at them and people make assumptions about them and they discriminate against them. Like the assumption that if you're a really beautiful woman, and especially if you're blonde, that you're dumb. And I mean, people look at our faces and they think, well, we might have a mental problem as well because our face is different. So
that's absolutely one of the myths about visible difference. And you brought up another really important point. Beauty blinds people to the more important characteristics of that individual. The most famous example of that is Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe died I think just days before her death. She made the statement, something to the effect of, "Won't people ever see me for anything other than my body?" That they didn't appreciate her mind and her other wonderful characteristics. And yes, that's very, very oh gosh, just horrible as well and traumatic. But we, of course, don't have as much empathy for individuals that are so beautiful. Most people don't think about those issues.
well, and it's because a lot of people who are beautiful do not feel beautiful.
Oh gosh, you think about the Dove campaign, where I think they interviewed 2,000 women, and only 2% of the women said that they found themselves to be attractive. That is, again, such a tragedy when you think, now these are women without a visible difference. These are women who are not out of the ordinary. So just imagine how people with visible difference feel, because they're constantly being compared to the other individuals. So, I mean, and this is a very serious problem in society. And as I said, too, it is constantly perpetuated by the media. Last night, I was actually shocked I happened to get a glimpse of a new show called Supergirl. And I think it's already become the #1 show on TV. And I was so disheartened and disappointed to see that the villain in last night's episode, of course, was an individual with lots of facial scarring. And I only kind of got a little glimpse of the character a few times, but almost looked like a burn survivor in some ways. And see, as long as this happens, it just reinforces these negative attitudes and these false beliefs towards individuals who look different. It's very frustrating, and it exists not just in film, but in children's literature. And that's an area that it's going to take a celebrity to get involved with this, to really bring the kind of attention to it, to make a difference. And I am encouraged by the wonderful documentary, I haven't had a chance to see it, about Lizzie Velasquez, that premiered in New York, and I think it's shown in a couple of cities so far. And some celebrities have come out to support Lizzie and with her work. And for those of you who may not be familiar with her, I don't even like to use the word that, but she was called the ugliest woman alive, and just received the most horrific hate email and comments on Facebook, and it was just dreadful. But she turned that into something very positive, and she has a rare disease that she can't gain weight. But as I said, I'm encouraged when I see celebrities come out and support this. I'm encouraged. There have been a lot of actresses who have been photographed without their makeup. There was a group of teens that petitioned 17 magazine. It's been a couple of years ago, but they petitioned the magazine and they said that if you don't quit using the models who are airbrushed and photoshopped and have the professional makeup on your covers in your magazines, we're going to quit buying them. So these are all important movements, and we need to have more of this in society. But it just takes time to try to change attitudes.
Well, I want to make is, first of all, let's hope that the people who get some celebrity status are people who have a difference. Because I think when people can speak from within their own community, it's going to be much more powerful than having some actor or actress who has good looks say, "Oh, treat people nicely." Just because they look different doesn't mean they're not great people. Also, about the villains on television and in the movies and whatnot, one of the problems, one of the things, some of the feedback I've gotten from other people who have physical differences is that people who don't assume that we're not able to be happy, to live full productive lives. And part of that is because I suppose what they use is the injury as the factor in that person's life that made them a villain, something that they became bitter and angry because of their injury. So that gives that character a certain motivation. Unfortunately, for those of us who look different and who are happy and live positive and productive lives, it's not very helpful. So,
That,
I guess I'm glad that they are at least finding motivations for their videos, or their villains, I mean, but at least try to make it something else, like something that somebody else did to them that was mean, that made them angry, rather than, oh, I was in an accident, now I hate myself. No, thank you.
yeah, unfortunately, Dawn, that is just one of those misconceptions. And I think, too, that's one of the things that I really enjoy with the Outside Inside program. I present slides showing, about 7 or 8 individuals with significant differences and the things they've accomplished. Like one of them is Kevin Michael Connolly, who wrote a great book called Double Take, and he was born with a condition that left him without legs. And that young man he won second place in the Winter Olympics, and he took $6,000 and he traveled to 17 countries and I think 33 cities, and he happens to be a photographer. He took 33,000 photographs, and he said all those photographs had one thing in common, and that was the look of disdain or shock or horror on the faces of the individual. There were just like a handful of people in that group of pictures that smiled at this young man. Well, he came back and he created an exhibit that's been in major museums throughout the country. You know, he's an author, he's a speaker, and he's still in his 20s. And, you know, I don't know many individuals of his age that have accomplished anything like that. And that's what I try to do with the students. I introduce them to other people like that so they can understand that, you know, just because you've got a difference or something tragic happened to you, it doesn't mean that you can't be happy or that you're not happy. And of course, not everybody is. Some people become very bitter, and, we're not in their shoes. We don't know what they've gone through. We don't know what kind of support or lack of support. We don't know. We don't know all the variables. We can't judge, and everybody can't be happy. But it's always possible to become better with help and with support and with the right resources.
So I know that in addition to the photos that you sent me of your own story and for the workshops you work on, you sent me the covers of a couple of books.
Oh, yes, thanks.
Yeah, looking at resources that people have.
Correct. Yes, and I mentioned one of those, or the author of one of those, which is Changing Faces by James Partridge. And again, James Partridge is really the pioneer in this work. And Changing Faces is in the UK. And it's really the only book written that gives you recommendations and suggestions and background as well about having an altered appearance and living with a facial difference. It's a little hard to come by because it's out of print. We, of course, do have copies of it, and then they can be obtained from Changing Faces in the UK. Right. And another book is called First Impressions. And First Impressions was written by a couple of psychiatrists. Dr. Demarius is one of them, and Valerie White, who, they're PhD psychologists, not psychiatrists. And it's about understanding how other people view us. And now this book wasn't specifically written for people with visible differences, but it applies to everybody. It has wonderful inventories and worksheets that you can use to better understand yourself and how you think people perceive you and what are the signals that you're putting out to other people. It's just wonderful, and they have kindly allowed me to reprint some of those materials and use those in the workshops. So those are two really good books. And another great book that I didn't give Dawn a picture of, but is an excellent resource about the science of staring. It's called How We Look, and this is by Rosemarie Garland Thomas, an excellent resource. What's on the screen now is a brochure that I wrote to accompany the workshop. It's called the What to Do When People Stare. And inside is sort of a little brief summary of what we cover in the workshop about the definition of staring and, how we feel and how other people feel. And then most importantly, 10 actions that you can take to diffuse those social interactions and to feel more comfortable in a social setting. And I think it also has recommendations for individuals who are not out of the ordinary about how to interact with those of us who do have a visible difference.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all that, because I think now that's interesting that you say that this book is the only book right now that talks about actually living with and dealing with having a facial difference, because the reason that there's so many little yellow sticky notes in here is because I'm actually writing a book about just that very subject. And the little yellow sticky notes are points that James has made, wonderful, excellent points that I'm going to consider using in my own book. So we can be a resource for each other. I'm also using some of Charlene's research as well. Absolutely. So thank you very much for that.
Oh, you're welcome. And it is, James's book is, as I said, it is absolutely excellent. And as well, please don't misunderstand. I think there are other people such as you, absolutely, who have written your own memoirs who discuss issues of living with a difference. I think that what is I hate to use the word different again, but about those books is the fact that James's book is more of, as you realize, has more research in it, and more of a self-help kind of book than a memoir.
No, I'm talking about the book I'm in the middle of writing now. My memoir.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Oh yeah, my memoir, Facing Up to It, was published a couple of years ago, and that's definitely available. But my point is, I'm actually in the process of writing another book. I know, but I'm not, trying to steal the top conversation here. So, are you working on any programs and projects currently, other than the workshops and stuff that you've been discussing? Aren't you working on a book?
I am writing a memoir, and my goal is to finish it by the end of the year. And hopefully, by asking me that question, you'll make me accountable. So thank you. So it's been something I've really wanted to finish, and I am working on that as well. I'm working on a research paper that I've been involved with for, oh gosh.
Whoops,
About 18
you just kind of froze up on us, so you might have to.
months.
Yeah. Charlene, you kind of cut out there for a second. Could you kind of repeat? Are you hearing me okay?
I wasn't, but I am now. I'll just end that with, we hope to be able to expand the reach of the Outside Inside program. Right now that's regional, but I would love to train other people to be able to go into the schools. This is a great template and would be fairly easy to reproduce once I could work with individuals. I'd love to see that being presented on a national basis. So that's something we definitely like to do.
Okay, now, like I said, we lost a couple of sentences. So you were talking about the Inside Out program. You were talking about your memoir. Was there anything else that I want to make sure we didn't miss something?
Oh, just about expanding the Outside Inside workshops. And no, I think you covered it. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Okay, so now my final question, and this is one I ask all my guests. If you had one action item, something that someone who is maybe not feeling so secure about their appearance, or who is afraid to go out in the world and live their life, if you had one action item, one piece of advice for them, something they could do today, start today, to start improving their life, what would it be?
Seek help immediately. Go to some of these websites. So come to our website, call me, send me an email, look at the website, or visit Changing Faces website, or if you've got a burn injury, go to the website for the Phoenix Society for Burn Survivors. If you contact me and I can't help you, or you have a specific condition, I can refine. And then again, these books that we've mentioned, go online if you can, or go to the library, or try to gain access to some of this information. If you're in a city that a community college might have a communications class or that you could participate in, that would be great. If you've got access and insurance coverage to help you with a therapist that you could go and talk with that might be able to give you more guidance. It is, as I said before, the greatest tragedy to me to meet people that are tormented by their visible difference, and that it interferes with their daily life. And I just can't emphasize enough how important it is to understand that that we can't let our difference define us or diminish us. We are so much more than what we look like. But reach out for help. There are other people out in this community that would love to help you or work with you or share what they can with you to get you in touch with the resources that you need.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Charlene. You started to break up just a little bit, and I think the part that was a little bit garbled was if you have a specific syndrome or situation, there are lots of websites like Mobius Syndrome Foundation and whatnot. So there's not only the general help like facing forward and about face and changing faces, but there's also specific help for certain types of disorders. I hate that word too, actually, disorder. But anyway, so that's really valuable, really important advice is to get help and find community. Hello, I can talk. Community. So again, Charlene, I'd like to just thank you so very much for being my guest today and for sharing your amazing experiences and all your valuable information and your research. Do you have any final words? I mean, those were so great, but I just want to make sure you have that opportunity if there's anything you'd like to say to just kind of sum things up that you haven't already said.
Again, I would just like to thank you for doing the work that you are doing and making these interviews possible. And as I said, I think it's valuable and educational and very interesting. And you, through this work, are increasing awareness and promoting that education that is the only thing that will ever change public attitudes. We have to, the more those of us who have differences put ourselves out there, get out and
Okay, she froze up again. So what I'm going to say is, I know
just
what she's saying.
decide about what
She does. Okay.
empathetic and understanding and appreciative. So thank you.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Just I agree with that totally. The more people who look different that get out into the world and are seen, the more people will be used to seeing people that are different, and the better that benefits us all. So I would like to just say thank you again, Charlene, for being here. And I'd also like to remind people, if you need to get a hold of Charlene, you can do so through the website. It's posted, www.facingforwardinc.org. If you contact me via the webinar or via my website, I will definitely, if you have a question for Charlene, I'll definitely pass it on to her. But that's always true. I'm always happy to help people. So again, this is my next webinar is Tuesday, January 5th. I'm going to take the rest of the year off. Well, sort of, because what I'll be doing is working on finding guests for my webinars next year. It will be at noon, and it's going to be with Loretta J. She is the executive director of a nonprofit called Be Stigma Free. So I'm looking forward to hearing what Loretta has to say and learning about stigma and what she's trying to do about it. Also remember, don't forget, it's just as it is just as important as being kind to other people, do not forget to be kind to yourself. This is author and professional speaker Don Shaw. I hope you have a great holiday, and I hope that you'll join me next year for more of these wonderful, amazing episodes.
We are love, we are one, we are how we treat each other when the day is done. We are peace, we are war, we are how we treat each other, nothing more. We are how we treat each other, nothing more. We are how